Therapeutic Community Modality Program of Malaysia. So, an introduction to treatment and rehabilitation for illicit drug use offenders in Malaysian prisons. Illicit drug use in Malaysia. Illicit drug use in Malaysia has been known as one of the biggest and most serious problems that exists. This problem has caused adverse effects on families, public safety, and the economy of the country. It also contributed to the incremental degradation of health statistics. The health risk of illicit drug use offenders is quite different from other addiction because of physiologically changes the body and brings even after the individual has stopped taking drugs. So illicit drug use also has a big potential to twist behavior to criminal behaviors because of drugs misuse. It has a devastating impact on physical and mental health as well as psychosocial well-being and criminal behavior. So laws that govern drug issues in Malaysia. First one is the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1952, an offense punishable by death for an accused to traffic in a dangerous drugs, offer to a traffic a dangerous drug, or do or offer to do a peremptory act for the purpose of trafficking in dangerous drugs. Next is Dangerous Drugs or Forfeiture of Property Acts of 1988. A Malaysian laws which enacted to make provisions for offences in relation to property and for the seizure and forfeiture of property connected with activity related to offences under this act. Next is the Dangerous Drugs or Special Preventive Measures Act of 1985. This is enacted to provide for the preventive detention of persons associated with any activity relating to or involving the trafficking in dangerous drugs. Next is Drug Dependence or Treatment and Rehabilitation Acts of 1983. So this act is to provide for the treatment and rehabilitation of drug dependence and for matters connected therewith. Next is Act 234, Dangerous Drugs Act of 1952, an act to make further and better provisions for the regulating of the important exportation, manufacture, sale, and use of opium and of certain other dangerous drugs and substances to make special provision relating to the jurisdiction of courts in respect of offences thereunder and their trial and for purposes connected therewith. The last one is the Act 638 or National Anti-Drugs Agency Act of 2004. So this act established the National Anti-Drugs Agency to vest powers on the officers of the agency to perform preventive treatment, rehabilitation, enforcement, investigation, special preventive measures, forfeiture of property, and administrative functions with respect to offences under Act 234 of Dangerous Drugs Act of 1952, Act 340 of Dangerous Drugs Forfeiture of Property Act of 1988, Act 316 of Dangerous Drugs Special Preventive Measures Act of 1985, and Act 328 of Dangerous Drugs Treatment and Rehabilitation Act of 1983. So, the illicit use of drugs is often observed to as drugs or substance abuse in Malaysia, especially by scholars. The illicit use of drugs also refer as against the benefit of medication and by a person who are not authorized by law. So most offenders in Malaysian prison consumed but not limited to opiates or heroin, feet, or poxec. The drugs that are famous and frequently used, as well as stimulants or methamphetamine, ecstasy, ice, shabu, and yaba, followed by less than a third of the respondents' other drugs such as marijuana, depressants, and kratom as well. Kratom is a tropical evergreen tea in the coffee family native to Southeast Asia. Kratom falls under the Poison Acts of 1951. So, all the drugs that I have mentioned falls under the definition of Dangerous Drugs Act in the first schedule of Dangerous Drugs Act of 1952 in Malaysia, as stated in section 6, 14, and 15, expressly mentioned that any act of possession, consuming, and administering are considered as guilty and liable for the specified period of imprisonment and specified amount of time.
The functions of Malaysian prisons. If the Philippines therapeutic community modality has a main core of reforming the offenders, the Malaysian prisons has the functions of number 1, to help rehabilitate the prisoners as well as to control and isolate them from jeopardizing the public. And second one is to treat all kinds of offenders with different types of drug issues with their own ways. So, since offenders are involuntarily legal custody by order, the prison's authorities have no abilities to choose their customers to put them in treatment. They are just in charge to treat all kinds of offenders with different types of drug issues with their own ways. The offenders must live according to the rules and regulations laid out for them, including the method of treatment. So what is the Malaysian prison? So ever since the British introduced incarceration or later adopted as the correctional system in Malaysia, they never cease the effort to treat and rehabilitate drug abusers. This is to align with their vision of the present Department of Malaysia, which is to be pioneers in corrective services, and its mission, which is to produce productive citizens through effective rehabilitation, through a conducive environment and strategic integration. Other than that, the Malaysian prison has the objective of ensuring all inmates are undergo safe custody until the date of discharge, to ensure all inmates are treated according to the rules and regulations, to ensure all categories of inmates are rehabilitated through effective rehabilitation programs, and to prepare inmates for effective reintegration into society. So I believe that the effectiveness of the rehabilitation process applied to the inmates is always a current topic of the society and the local authorities. Thus, the Malaysian prisons have a high expectation for the offenders to be rehabilitated during their sentence in prison, especially those illicit drug users. So, treating drug involved offenders provides a unique opportunity to decrease substance abuse and reduce associated criminal behavior. And I believe that through the criminal justice system of Malaysia, it will give a huge and beneficial effects to the drug abuser through its treatment.
For the part 2, the topic is about the issue, challenges, and possible solution and treatment and rehabilitation program in Malaysia prison. So under this topic, they have maintaining the recidivism rate. So recidivism rate in Malaysians is refers to ex-convict who re-offend and return back to the prison within 3 years after being. So based on the recidivism rate, Malaysian prisons have established the standard benchmarking for the achievement of inmate rehabilitation in order to demonstrate that the rehabilitation program include those criminals involved in illicit drug use. So the jail administrations has decided to adhere their percentage of recidivism not surpassing 10%. Chart that shows the recidivism achievement rate from year 2011 to 2017. So for the 2011, they have a 7.97%, and 2012 they have a 7.61%, and the 2013 they have a 8.7%, and 2014 they have 8.6%, and 2015 have a 8.59%, and 2016 have 8.89%, and 2017 have 9.3%. The result showed that the rehabilitation programs was successful in reducing the rate of recidivism, with 8.7% recorded in 2015 and below the Home Ministry of 9% threshold. However, one of the problems faced by the Malaysia is the issue that the trend is increasing or decreasing. In Malaysian prisons, the majority of prisoners are the illicit drug use of offenders and the drug-related criminals. So according to the research of Jamal Ali and Company 2014, the trend of the illicit drug use of offenders likely to increase in Malaysian prisons. So when the trend is increased in Malaysian prisons, it is not directly reflected of the increment of government administration cost. That's why Malaysians needs to be aware of this, as it will be exceeding the current benchmarking. So for their solutions, the prison authorities suggested to separate the drug-related criminals and the illicit drug use of offenders. So instead of being classified as the repeat offenders, they would be relapse offenders. So this would be maintain the current rate of recidivism. Malaysian prisons have not yet set benchmark for the percentage of offenders who relapse being used illicit drugs. In order to prevent relapse, they would receive the proper care in terms of therapy and rehabilitation.
Hi, I'm Osol Lamancho, and I'm going to tackle about mental health, depression, and offenders' readiness to change. Mental health and depression were interrelated when mental state of illicit drug use offenders is concerned. Depression is classified under mood disorders, as the mood in a major depressive episode is often described by the person as depressed, sad, hopeless, discouraged, or down in the dumps. A mental disorder depression are common among Malaysian offenders, and there is a growing population of mental health problems where prisoners may be undetected and treated with this issue. Offenders exhibit higher levels of anxiety and depression than the general population, along with lower levels of self-esteem, specifically among certain groups of offenders with substance abuse problems. The depression among adults showed bias recall towards negative information relative to non-depression adults. There are several cases in Malaysian prisons showing that offenders have such symptoms. This was the challenge that needed to be faced by the prison authority, since this kind of offenders' condition would affect the effectiveness of treatment and the rehabilitation process. Furthermore, readiness to change among them cannot be captured accurately when these issues are not resolved. Among others, the prison authority does not yet initiate any treatment and rehabilitation module for the offenders who are in the state of mental incapability and depression, and rather refers them to the hospital that is beyond the prison authority's jurisdiction. As a solution, the prison authority has requested several psychiatrists from the Ministry of Health to attend to them and to construct such modules. Recently, the health minister has agreed to place several psychiatrists within the prison walls to cater to such issues, which form a good kickstart. It is hoped that treatment and rehabilitation of illicit drug use offenders is done holistically throughout the country.
Good day, I'm Lucky Alumno and I'll be continuing the report. Readiness to change is important and needs to be enhanced to prisoners before they will be released. So according to research, there are mostly of the offenders are drug offenders, drug users, so they need to continuously be rehabilitated for them until they reach the point wherein they have their own initiative to have their willingness and readiness to change. Many prisoners go to treatment under pressure because of the environment of the prison, and the treatment is compulsory. So, prisoners are most likely to be forced to treatment because of their environment, which is, the prison authorities are sending them. Although many prisoners goes to treatment every day, they might not be ready to change. As a solution, they apply the stages of change, readiness in treatment, eagerness scale, or the Socrates. Two offenders who show signs of willingness to change. So the Socrates is a set of questionnaires to measure the level of willingness and eagerness of offender to the measurement or the scale of the level of their willingness to change.
Good day, everyone. My name is Brent F. Abelino. Um, in the chapter 3 on illicit drugs, youth offender rehabilitation and treatment program, I'm gonna discuss to you the structured program, integrated human development program. Um, this program was started in year 2003 and has been enhanced ever since. This is the structured program that was intended for all offenders in Malaysian prisons but separated by specific module according to offenders categories, including illicit drugs use offenders. The objectives, the objectives of this program were to develop the attitudes, skills, and knowledge of the offenders during their incarceration. The program consisted of four phases which have been simplified as follows. As you can see in the PowerPoint, there is a four phases with different functions. Um, in the phase 1, which is the discipline emphasis phase with a duration of 2 months. And after that, proceed to the phase 2, which is the character building phase with a duration of 6 months. And in the phase 3, skill enhancement phase until qualified for fourth phase in their duration. And last but not the least, the phase 4, the reintegration phase with a duration until its release.
This is Echo Bacalso, the next reporter. We have the hand modules. The Prison Department of Malaysia is responsible for implementing drug treatment for the drug offenders, where they undergo their sentences through the Human Development Program, applying a psychoeducation module. It is called eHand. This was introduced to the Prison Department in year 2017. These modules consist of 17 chapters. Hand modules are focusing on the changes process for evaluation, and enhancement of the offenders. In every chapters usually are focusing on the early recovery rehabilitation for offenders, for drug users, and also these modules are to evaluate the offender the readiness to change and severity of addiction among offenders. Next, we have that therapeutic community programs. Therapeutic community programs are one of the successful programs in Malaysian prisons. It has been started in 1992 using the USA frameworks by the officers who received that particular training. Therapeutic community programs, this was based on the help of four groups: residential, family oriented, wherein the offenders are put together in their family, or the other offenders who having the same interests to undergo the drug rehabilitation process. These are the objectives and framework undergo the drug rehabilitation process: developing offenders' autonomous decision making, developing the offender's life objectives, enhancing sensitivity towards himself and others, or the enhancing the connection to the others, developing self-efficacy and reducing self-defeating outlook. And last, we have the communication and confrontation skills. In therapeutic community programs, there are key program elements, or the different types of activities or programs. It consists of different types of group activities, like for example, the encounter, peer confrontation, assertiveness training, morning meeting, in-house meeting. Like for example, in Malaysian prison, morning meeting, ginaset ang mga direct and confront problems through peer confrontation within a group meeting to be able the offenders or the members to become honest and respectful and become accountable for their behavior. Also there are programs, vocational training, religious education, and counseling, and the house chores. So these are the programs and activities usually are assisted by the volunteers with religious components in order to provide an equal treatment to those Muslims, Christians, and Buddhist beliefs. So these are the example of the daily schedule for group and religious therapy and other programs and activities provided by the officers inside the prison.
Methadone maintenance therapy. This is the one and only pharmacological treatment that has been implemented for illicit drug use offenders in Malaysian prisons. This program started in 2009, where synthetic drugs called methadone were used to replace opioids to reduce dependency. This program is purposely focused on the reduction of harm caused by the offenders who has stopped using drugs but physically and psychologically dependent of the substance, especially opioids. Since the program was monitored by the Ministry of Health, the rate of effectiveness of the program throughout Malaysian rests with them. However, the therapy was very effective for the offenders in Malaysian prisons. The next is the rehabilitation outside prison walls. Beside the program implemented inside the prison perimeter, There are several methods used by Malaysian prisons to accelerate the rehabilitation process of the offender that is outside the prison walls called the reintegration process. This process is the next stage of rehabilitation process that has been mentioned earlier. It shows that the rate of recidivism among the illicit drug use offenders who have undergone this process was below 1%. The rehabilitation program where the parole system, the next is the community rehabilitation program. The Community Rehabilitation Program, a center has been established outside the prison perimeter to gather offenders and undergo skills and vocational training together with the society. Here their skills, including farming, manufacturing, and agriculture, were either nurtured or enhanced to enable offenders to sustain themselves after release from prison. Unlike the parole system that requires offenders to sustain their own lives during the program, offenders at this center would be closely monitored by the prison officers within required proximity. Although the severity of the crime and the period of imprisonment are the factors that separated offenders in the parole system and CRP. Nevertheless, the objectives were the same: to promote strong self-efficacy of the offenders to face the community in order to avoid relapse and reoffending.
So my topic was all about parole system in Malaysia. The parole system was established in 2008 where the offenders were put outside the prison walls to have a normal functioning life with their families, but under prison authority and supervision. So, when the parole system was first established by the Malaysian Prisons Department more than a decade ago, there were concerns over how the authorities would manage the risks involved, particularly those regarding public safety and security. So the parole system in Malaysia was introduced in 2007 in the Prison Act 1995 and it was established in 2008. So in July 2008, the pioneer batch of 64 convicted prisoners was released on parole. In Malaysia, unlike the other countries, the parole order was granted with the suggestion of Malaysian prisons, not direct issuance of the judiciary. So, the Malaysian also use court order parole. This system was issued by Malaysian prison with close supervision by parole board authorities. So therefore, prisoner must undergo the imprisonment process before the parole order was granted, subject to their good behavior and compliance with other compulsory condition. So, the legislative intention of introducing the Malaysian parole system was to elevate prison overcrowding and operating costs, reduce recidivism, and to rehabilitate the prisoners to ensure successful reentry and reintegration into society through the role of the family, employers, or community members. So, the parole system in Malaysia is administered by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So there are two governmental offices are concerned with administration of the parole system. So first is the parole board. So the parole boards, recently there are three parole boards in Malaysia parole system. A parole board shall consist of the following members who shall be appointed by the Yang di Pertuan Agong. So a chairman from amongst members of the judicial and legal service, B, a senior prison officer, and C, a senior police officer. Then the last is the three members of the public. So, with a view to encouraging good conduct in industry and to facilitate reformative treatment of prisoners, a parole board shall have the following powers. So, A, to make a decision whether to release a prisoner on parole. B, to suspend or revoke a parole order. C, to add or vary in condition of a parole order.
D. To hold an inquiry on any matter related to parole. D. To examine any prisoners for the purpose of soliciting additional information related to a parole application or any other reason the parole board deems fit. And the last one is to exercise and perform such other function and duties as the minister may determine. So, the parole board shall examine and evaluate the parole shares received from a prison officer in respect of such prisoners and any other report prepared by any prison officers in relation to an application for release on parole. So, the second governmental offices are Malaysia Prison Department. So, in Malaysia, the parole system is a newly established program in order to enhance the rehabilitation program for convicts. So, the parole system is designed for inmates who show exemplary behavior during incarceration. It is seen as an incentive which inmate must earn in order to enjoy it through demonstrating positive adjustment and fulfilling the requirement stated in the program. So, the parole system in Malaysia requires to be considered for parole release. So, prisoners must be sentenced to a year and above of prison and have completed half of the amount of punishment decided by any court. So, subsequently, the parole officer placed in the prison institution is entrusted with preparing evaluation forms for submission to the parole department headquarters for scrutiny and then passes them on the parole boards. So, the Malaysia Prison Department has organization structure of parole and community service. So, the head is Commissioner of Prison, the Director, Parole and Community Service. So, under the Director, Parole and Community Service is the Senior of Prison. There are two, the Head of Parole Section and the Head of Community Service Section. So, under the Head of Parole Section, there are Parole Unit. Then the Head of the Community Service Section, under are the Compulsory Attendance Center Unit, Community Rehabilitation Program Unit, and Halfway House Unit. So, the parole system has monitoring and supervision. So, a parolee who is released by the parole order must comply with the condition laid down in the parole order. So, the parole order will be issued by the board after being satisfied with the report lodged by the parole of the institute as well as the support of the Parole and Community Service Division, the head office. So, terms of the parole order shall be read on the day of release and every condition shall be understood by the parolee. So, more than 20 conditions have been set by the parole board and among the conditions that the parole must adhere to are as follows. So, number 1, parolee is prohibited from engaging in criminal activity. Number 2, parolee must not leave the designated area without the permission of a parole officer. Number 3, parolee is prohibited from using any prohibited or intoxicating substance. 4, parolee shall comply with any directions from parole officers. 5, parolee is prohibited from using any illicit drugs. So, parole is granted to those inmates who have successfully completed and surpassed the comprehensive assessment by the prison authority and an internal community evaluation followed by an external evaluation. While they are on parole, the parolees will be supervised and monitored by parole officers in the specific designated area. In the event of breach of terms and the condition imposed on them while under parole, it will lead to the revocation of their parole order.
Conclusion: the main objective of drug treatment of the prison department is to rehabilitate and to treat as well as to prevent relapse among drug offenders. Prisoners are the products of the prison and the nation who are willing to change their negative behavior towards becoming an excellent individual. Prison authorities have played their part well in overcoming such issues and will keep going until it keeps the Malaysian nation in good condition. In doing so, countless efforts have been done. Numbers of suggestions have been taken into account and several research projects have been set up. Currently, Malaysian Prisons Authority has suggested alternative punishment for illicit drug use offenders, namely day parole, home detention, suspended sentence and compulsory attendance order as alternative rehabilitation. This is a way to decrease the chances of rearrest, reducing the cost associated with incarceration, providing them with the choice of changing substance, abusing behavior to overcome overcrowding, and to strengthen drug treatment among offenders. In addition, day parole means release of a convicted offender from imprisonment on conditions during the day which prisoner will be required to return to prison each night. And next is home detention. It is both a punitive and rehabilitation sentence. It requires an offender to remain a suitable and approved residence at all times and be monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Home detention allows an offender to seek or maintain employment, complete a sentence of community work if imposed, access programs to address their offending, and maintain their family relationships. That's all. Thank you.